Okay, so this may be a little bit difficult to see red on red and whatever, but here, there's this thing here. It's a stop, and it can be adjusted out this way or flipped out of the way. And I've set it for 4 inches from the blade of the saw. And so I can pick the saw up like this. This is a vise that holds stuff on the saw. I can push this out to the stop, and I can make sure it's flat against the vise. That's important so that your cut is square. And now this switch turns the saw on by pulling up and turns it off by pushing down. And there's a little thing on the saw here that when this part of the saw goes all the way down, it hits the switch and turns it off. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn the saw on, I'll rest it against the metal, it'll start cutting through. I'll go and start drilling more holes in the parts that I'm cutting off here while the saw cuts this piece. And as soon as it's through cutting the piece, this will hit the switch and the saw will shut off by itself. So I don't need to attend to the saw while it's cutting. I'm just going to go and drill more holes. And so I'm stacking all the cut angle pieces on the washing machine. Because the milling machine is plugged into the dryer outlet, so it always has to be by the washer and dryer. Just clip on. You can watch me drill some holes. And it's real easy now that the digital readout is set up. I just punch this hole. So I move the readout to another hole number 2. Hole. Move it to 1. Drill a hole. Move it to 0. Drill a hole. Open the vise. Clean the chips off, spin it around, align the angle with the edge of the vise. We're already at 0, right? So this is the milling machine. And the first rule when Fred agreed to sell it to me was that you have to have your hair tied up somehow before you ever apply power to the machine, because he had somebody working in his shop that got hair entangled in the spindle and like it ripped a big chunk of their scalp out, and they went to the hospital bleeding profusely, and there's a big patch where hair never grew back. So first thing with the milling machine is that this one is a knee mill, which means I can raise and lower this work table, and I use this crank here. Right now I'm raising it up a little bit closer to the drill. This table can move left and right like this, front and back like this. There's this vise to clamp stuff down. And this big arm to run the quill up and down. So I'm setting up the mill to make multiple parts. And one of the most important things, if you don't have a fixture that's going to hold the part in the same place, is to have some index. Right, so I'm lining the edge of the part up with the edge of the vise, and then tightening the vise down. And so every part from here on out is always going to start right there at the edge of the vise. And let's see, there is, here, let me just hand hold the camera for a bit. This is my vise. This lets this and one on the other side moves the milling table left right. Like this. This lever here moves the quill up and down. And for the moment I'm going to set it just above the level of the metal. And then this part here, right here, locks the quill in place. Trying to do it one-handed while holding the camera. Alright, so this locks the quill in place. So now I'm going to set up my measurement system for the parts. I'm right at the edge there with the left right, and this handle here moves the table front back. And so I'm moving it back to that far corner. And nothing, these are just brackets to hold up some vertical posts to be the railing of the dock. So nothing is like very critical or precise. So I'm just eyeballing everything. So now that that's in that corner, this thing here is a digital readout. for the milling machine. I'm gonna zero these. Okay. And that's still at the corner. So I'm pretty sure this is 3 inches wide and 4 inches that way. But just for fun, I'm going to measure it with the digital readout on the mill. So I'm cranking the front back thing to get to the corner. And there we are, 3 inches. So I'm going to crank it back to the middle, say like around 1.5. Close enough. And there it is, about in the center. And I think I'm going to move in from the edge about 1/2 inch. Close enough. And there we are, in 1/2 inch. And if you're cutting metal, you always want some oil or lubrication. WD-40 works fine. The spray is convenient. Alright. This switch turns the mill on. This lever here lowers the quill. And if this was something to be precise, I'd have it supported under here. Because the metal's going to deflect a bit. But I just don't put a lot of pressure on it, and I'll drill right through. I've drilled through. And that's where I want my first hole to be on every part. So I'm going to zero that indicator. Oh, and again, sorry I can't hold the camera and do it. Alright, so that is now 0. Alright, and I'm going to move over 1 inch to make the next hole. Close enough. And now that you've seen the digital readout, I'm just going to move over another inch. Move over another inch. So there's my part. I've done both sides now. So I'll get another piece of metal. Plant this in. And I could move this back to 0, but the digital readout, it's reading 3 inches. And so I can just go back the other way because I'm at like multiples of an inch. So I'll move it to 3, move it to 2, to 1, and then back to 0 for the final hole. And for brackets to hold up a railing, I mean, this is overkill. I could do it with a hand drill and like it would hold the railing up just fine. It's kind of nice to have the digital readout because the holes all look real neat and they're all the same space apart. And all the parts come out the same. So again, I put this in way just right at the very edge, so I know that this will be about a ½ inch in. And if I wanted this to be much more precise, I could build a fixture that clamps these in exactly the same spot, but I'm not.